This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, an international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society. I am Sylvain Newton, a coach who is passionate about supporting teams and people to grow, and I'm your host for the AC DACH podcast. In this new podcast, designed by the German, Swiss, and Austrian chapter of the Association for Coaching and offered worldwide, I talk to coaches, academic, and experts who share their passion for this incredible profession. We will dive deep into one specific aspect of their work. Our ambition is to contribute to the development of the coaching profession at large, and more specifically, to bring you some new ideas and insights that you can start implementing right away. Well, Caroline, welcome on our podcast. I'm delighted to have you here today. And maybe we start with a brief introduction of yourself, if you don't mind.
Not at all, Sylvain. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Carolyn Freyer-Jones, and I am a professional coach and facilitator.
That sounds great. We are going to explore that a little bit further during our discussion today. But let me get started with two questions I ask all our guests on the podcast. And the first one is, you said you are a coach, Caroline. So why did you join the profession of coaching originally?
I love that question. I joined it because I ended up interacting with a coach that made such a huge difference in my life. And Sylvain, I know you know him. His name is Steve Chandler. So I was working at the University of Santa Monica, which is where I earned my master's in spiritual psychology. And I had completed the graduate program. It had transformed my life. I was now working at the university because I had been so impacted by the education. And I had started to hear a little bit about the field of coaching, right? Not a lot, but a little. And I reached kind of this crossroads in my work at the university. And I had happened to have met Steve at a talk he gave at the university. He gave a talk about fundraising. And there was something about him that so struck me, his humor, first of all, but there was something about him. And as I was sitting in my office kind of going, what am I going to do? I thought, maybe that guy knows a coach. Like, I'd heard about this thing called coaching, and I wrote to him and I said, listen, I don't know if you do this. I don't know if you know someone who does. I met you when you gave your talk at the University of Santa Monica. I'm on the staff. I'm the head of marketing. And then I didn't hear from him. And I thought, okay, that's not going to work. And 2 weeks later, I got an email, and all it said, Sylvain, was call me, with a phone number. And then right behind that was another email with all these testimonials of people, from people he'd coached. And I thought, oh my gosh, does he really mean this? Like, I'm supposed to call him right now? Like, there's no time on the email, nothing. So I call the number and I hear Steve Chandler's voice, and he says, hello. And I said, hi, my name is Carolyn. I emailed you. And he said, yeah, Carolyn. And he spent 2 hours with me on that call. And let me just be upfront. I earned a master's in spiritual psychology, where I learned one of the many skills I learned there is this skill of heart-centered listening. And being listened to by Steve Chandler just in that first 2 hours was transformative. The questions he asked me, and, I'll fast forward the story. I hired him as my coach. And I mentioned to him that I'd done a little bit of coaching, and he just stopped me right there. And he said to me, well, why aren't you doing that now? And I said, I'm working at the university and I love it. And I want to create more opportunities here. Well, that changed. And I've been coaching with Steve ever since. He's not just my coach anymore. Obviously, now he's my colleague. He's my friend. He teaches at the school I run. So, coaching, I'm a product of coaching. I'm a product of many things, Sylvain, but I'm a product of coaching and the transformative impact it has. And that's what made me get more excited about what I could do in that world, because I had all the skills. The program at USM is so experiential and so much about my own life, and whoever's there, it's their life. But I became so skilled at learning how to facilitate and coach, even though my going there had nothing to do with me becoming a coach. That's not why I earned a master's in spiritual psychology, surprise, surprise. And it just so happens it was the best training and foundation for my work as a professional coach. So that's kind of a long answer.
Yeah, it's a great story, Caroline. We'll come back to it in a minute because I think there are a few things we could explore more. But let me ask you the second question I had, which is, what is the most exciting and what is the scariest about being a coach?
Well, to me, the most exciting thing is the impact that we can have as professional coaches. I mean, to help someone transform their lives, what could be more exciting than that, right? To have someone go from living their life one way, with one way of thinking and one way of being, into a completely different one that is more joyful, that is more fulfilling. They experience more success in the world. I mean, to me, I don't really care what kind of coach you are, whether you're a leadership coach or a life coach or a health coach or an executive coach there's so many kinds of coaching now, right? But what we all have in common is the intention to help someone transform. And to me, that's exciting. There's so much excitement in that, in serving people that way. Now, in terms of the scariest, it's a great question. I love it. I was reading it. I was thinking, what scares me now? Because what scares me now is very different than what scared me 15 plus years ago, right? So what scares me now, there really isn't. I really can't put my finger on anything specific, but let me say this. I think I don't know if I'd use the word scary, but I think one of the best things we get to do as a coach is to be on our edge. And that can feel scary, right? Like if I'm going to do something entirely brand new. So you know this, Sylvain, I wrote a book, right, with my colleague. And I had no intention of writing a book. I had no intention of producing a book. Now, I'd never done that before, and I was scared. I was really scared. I was like, it was scary to release it. The writing of it wasn't as scary, but the idea that other people who I didn't even know would read it, that was scary. It felt vulnerable. So to me, what's scary about being a coach sometimes is putting yourself in very new territory where we don't have prior experience, right? Many of us in the world, no matter where we live, are so used to wanting to already know how to do things. And I didn't know how to do that. And so that felt scary. And I'm sure there's other things, right? I didn't have a school 5 years ago. And when I first said I was going to do that, that felt ridiculously scary.
It's interesting, Caroline, if I can build on that, because when I think of new coaches that start in the profession, there is something scary I often hear, which is, hey, I'm going to have that conversation, that coaching conversation with a client, and I have no clue where it's going to lead me. So that's different from being a trainer, from doing other type of work where, of course, there is some part of unknown, but most of it is scripted. You know where it's going. And here you have no clue where it's going. And for some new coaches, that's the scary part. So how do you help them in your school to come to terms with that? And I don't know if there are some technique they can use, if it's a mindset question, if it comes with experience, but how do you help them with that?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. So to me, when we're new, right, and Sylvain, you can relate to this, of course it's scary, right? Because we're talking about a conversation between two people where it's intimate, right? It's like we're asking someone to bring their challenges and opportunities into a conversation where supposedly we're going to help them. So it can feel scary. And one of the things, that I do with new coaches, whether it's in the school or we're just talking, it's like to really make that okay. Of course, like it's natural. We don't want to like try to deny that that's a real thing. Of course it can feel scary. And what we also talk about is like, look, the person you're with, you don't need to impress them. This is not about impressing people, right? The profession of coaching is not about looking good. It's not about being impressive. It's about being with someone where they are, right? Just being with them. And if we can be with someone in their lives and just ask good questions, if we can just start there as a new coach, a lot can occur, right? So for new coaches, it's like, do I have good questions? Do I know how to ask good questions? Sometimes if that's all we have, that is enough. It's like many new coaches go into it with like, I need to change this person's world in this next hour. And, when I work with new coaches, I'm always saying to them, let's take down the pressure some, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take it down some. And let's just really see if we can get you relaxed so that you can serve them in this next hour. Even if the needle moves just a little in this first conversation, that can be a lot for someone. That can be a lot. So it's like, really, how do we make it okay that, of course, it feels scary? Sometimes new things feel scary. And I also work with like, is it scary or is it exciting? Because those emotions can be very similar. And sometimes we call it scary when the truth is it feels exciting, right? It's new. It's like, I've never done this before. But we don't need to impress people. And it's like we're not trying to rip someone into a whole new life within 1 hour. Like that's a lot to ask of ourselves, especially when we're new.
Right. That's interesting, Caroline, because indeed, when I started, I had almost that sense that I had to find an amazing question, maybe to impress my client or maybe as well to help them find solution to their issue. And that is what put me some pressure, because I was always thinking, okay, what's the next question? And at some point I realized, by not thinking about the next question, by just being present, by just listening, being there for them, then I can trust myself that a great question will occur because it comes from the discussion, not from my intention to ask a great question.
That is so spot on, right? It's like if we slow down enough, and Sylvain, this, a big emphasis in the school is like learning how to slow down our own thinking so that we can just be with someone. The question will emerge. It's like, look, one of the things people pay us for, and this is a quote from Nancy Klein. I did not create this. So, and we can talk about Nancy Klein because she's well known in Europe as a coach. She does the time to think work, but it's like people pay us for the quality of our listening. Mm-hmm. That's what they're paying for. And sometimes just deep listening is transformative, even without a question, Sylvain. Sometimes just someone, look, I coach leaders, I coach executives. They do not have anyone who listens to them with no agenda. It's like I have no agenda when I coach a corporate leader. And sometimes just the pure act of listening so that they can hear themselves creates new ideas and thoughts for them.
That's a great one, Caroline. And you mentioned that from Steve earlier. You said during the 2 hours that you had with him, you said he was really deeply listening to me. So if we connect those two, Nancy and Steve, who are very well known in the profession, what do they do that make them such great listeners? How did you experience it as a coachee?
That's a great one. That's such a good question, Sylvain. So I'm sitting here because right now, as you know, I still get coached by Steve, and I'm also coached by Nancy. I do thinking sessions with her. And the thing that they both have in common with their listening is, first of all, we can't talk about coaching without talking about, and I don't know how often this word is used in all the interviews you do, Sylvain, but like we can't take out and not consider the word love. Mm-hmm. That love and being loving is part of the profession. Like Steve and Nancy, while very different from each other, they're so different. And they are both so, the quality of their listening is infused with loving. Steve's his listening has a sharpness to it, right? Because he's really all about language, right? Steve is listening because our language creates our world, right? So he's listening. And I would say that Nancy's listening she is listening for our thoughts, for my thoughts to come to the surface so that I can hear them. She's all about, like, the mind knows how to work out its own problems. The mind knows. And her listening is like a battery. It's like being listened to by a live battery. And she's not, remember, the Nancy Klein work, the coach is not speaking. So her listening is like if I could describe it, it's like being listened to by something so big And Steve's listening has a sharpness. And so it's amazing, right? That the quality of loving, like that's universal, and each person's specific way can have such a uniqueness to it.
That's interesting. I like the nuances, Caroline. What I found with my client is at time, as a coach, you can hear more than what they say because you sense emotion, you see the body language, you hear pauses between words, and they don't realize that. And then you play back something and they say, oh, you are right. And they didn't even realize it. And my sense is it can be a lot of value for a client to go there.
It can. And newer coaches underestimate the power of listening and a few good questions, right? Because look, when we're new, we're so anxious, right? We want to have impact. I don't even love that word, frankly, because I think it's overused, but it's an important word. It's like, we want to have an impact. We want to make a difference. And we can be so, in a way, we make ourselves the agenda. So we're making it about us with those thoughts, right? We're making it like, I want to have an impact. I want to make a difference. And if we flip it, if we go, what if I just am here in service to someone? What if I am only in service and I see what occurs and it's not about me and my impact? That's the thing as new coaches we all do, right? We want to have something occur because then we feel better. And it's not really about that. It's really about how can we be in service to another human being, totally in service to them without our own thoughts of what we want to have occur.
Right. It almost sounds like a masterclass in humbleness. It's all about the other.
It's true. It's very true.
Caroline, you mentioned the word service, which we start hearing more and more thanks to Steve Chandler's book around the prosperous coach. Can you say a little bit more for new coaches? What does it mean to serve others? Does it mean to coach others? What does it mean?
So it's such a good question, and it's a big question, right? I mean, to me, service is about, it's really, we can expand on this. It's really about like, I'm not going to be focused on my own quote unquote need to get a client. Like, to be in service to another, it's like I'm in 100% in their world. I'm 100% focused on them. I used to do this when I was at the beginning of my own coaching practice, where before a session would start, I mean, I would kind of do this process with myself, and, depends on your context, right? Someone might go, oh, that's some spiritual practice. And another person might say, no, it's more of just a intention setting practice, right? So it just depends on your context. But I would be very clear with myself that no matter what occurred, I wanted the person to leave experiencing transformation. And I would really say in my own way, I would say, like, look, I don't care if this person becomes my client, if it's not for the highest good, if it's not for their highest good. If it is, great, I'd love that. But the most important thing is that I do everything I can so that they leave feeling 100% served, whether or not they become my client, whether or not.
It's interesting, Caroline. You remind me of the book that you recommended to me, which is The Go-Giver.
Yes.
And the first rule is deliver more value than you charge for. And in that case, that might even mean I don't charge anything because it's not a client. And yet I already deliver some value to them.
Absolutely. Like, especially when we're new, right? It's like when we're new, we can get so in our heads around like, I need to do this. I need to make money. I need to talk about my fees versus like, let's slow all that down. Like, what if you just serve the person in front of you? And by the way, that doesn't always mean a formal coaching conversation, because at the beginning, sometimes we don't have a lot of those on our calendar, right? It's like, we're like, oh my gosh, how do I create conversations? And that means being willing to get out in the world and be of service wherever we are. My first real clients came from the gym I went to. And you know why? Because I went to the gym a lot. They were the people in my world, and I just started connecting and being curious. Like, oh, people I worked out next to, I would start to be like, oh, tell me more about this. Tell me more about your job. Questions I never asked. It made a difference, right? Our own curiosity when we're out in the world makes a difference. It does. And that is a beginning way to serve, right? If we don't have any clients, quote unquote, it's like, how are we going to do that? Well, start serving whoever's in your world, whether it's the person who's coming to measure your curtains or the person you're running into at the coffee shop.
That's great. So to get more clients, go to the gym. I got this one. No, it's great, Caroline. So you mentioned before that you have that school, which I had the chance to be part of, Caroline, and that was certainly a transformative experience. And I heard so far 2 skills you mentioned for a coach. There is the skill of deep listening, and there is the skill of question and asking good questions. Are those the 2 skills you teach in your school, or do you think to become a great coach, we need other skills?
Oh, I think to become a great coach, there's more. However, I always say this, and Steve Chandler always says this, you can create a coaching practice from really deep listening and good questions. It's not like you need a ton of other quote unquote techniques. What you do need though, you can be someone who has deep listening and asks good questions. However, if your own, let's call it noisy thinking, is also present, that will get in the way of creating clients, and it will definitely get in the way of us becoming a better coach, right? If I'm all wrapped up in me, how do I look? How do I sound? Am I doing it right? I'm nervous. All those thoughts have one thing in common. They're about me. So, in the school, one of the things we're constantly doing is assisting coaches in getting out of their own way. In other words, it's like, we don't even know when we're leaking our own self-centeredness. We don't know that, right? I didn't know it. We don't know when we're leaking our own neediness, when we're in that. So in the school, we spent a lot of time assisting coaches in seeing, where am I making it about me? And where is my own money stuff, my own whatever it is, getting in the way of my ability to see someone clearly and be in service to them. So to me, it's like, I was never formally certified as a coach, right? It's like I got a master's in spiritual psychology. I had, without any intention of using that to be a professional coach. Now, it was a 2-year program. I got a lot of transformational tools and skills. However, I'm not saying to anyone listening to this, it's like, I think certification, if that's something if you have no training and you're like, I need something, I think it's great. It's not a requirement, as we all know. However, it's like many certification programs, they teach us what I would call the basics. They give us a baseline. What they don't really get at is what's happening inside of us will get in the way of us creating clients and us being able to be with someone and take them deeper. Right? The reason people are going to hand us money is because something changed when they were with us. It has to. Otherwise, they're not going to give us money. No one's going to give money just to have a nice talk. Something has to change. So in the school, we're constantly honing in on, where are you inside? Because if you're in a noisy place, transformation is not going to occur. It just won't.
And Caroline, I like the concept of the noisy thinking, which sounds almost like a filter that you create because of your mindset or state of mind, of work that you have not done on yourself between you and the coachee, and therefore you cannot go as deep as you would like, or you don't serve, to use your word, as much the coachee as you could because of that filter in between.
Yeah, and it's human. It's not like, oh, everyone should know this when they start coaching. It's not like I didn't. It's like I had, even with my background, now I had a lot, but I still had to learn, what does it mean to sit with someone and really put myself aside and really be with someone with no agenda other than them. It's like I had to really learn how to be sensitive to my own internal state so that when I walk in and sit with someone, I'm really 100% present with them. That takes practice, right? It's like you don't just do that out of the gate. No one does. There's nobody I know that does that. And by the way, the best coaches I know, the very best and the most successful, are the ones that get coached. Like, I just spent 3 days in a room full of more seasoned coaches that are earning well over 6 figures. And I was co-facilitating with a member of my guest faculty at my school. His name is Devin Bandison. Now, Devin teaches at my school. He comes a day and a half during the 6 months. And Devin, like all the guest faculty, one of the things they have in common is these are people who've been in the business a long time. They're still getting coached deeply, right? They're not getting off the court with being coached, right? So it's not something we can just do out of the gate. I need someone who's going to help me see my blind spots. We all have blind spots.
Mm-hmm. So a good coach get coached regularly.
Yeah.
Caroline, you mentioned as well that something has to change. I like this one. So coaching somebody is not just having a good discussion and then we live happily and the work is done, but you want something to have changed in the other person as a result of the discussion you had. Are there some, let's say, things that you see, that you hear, some criteria that enable you to know now I really helped that person to change? Because it's quite a big goal. It's a great goal, and yet at times for a coach it can be quite lonely. You might not get feedback. You don't know how much you've pushed it enough, if you've helped them or not. So what are some of the cues you take to know if you've achieved that goal well enough?
Okay, so I'm going to put forward maybe what some would think is a crazy radical idea. Are you ready?
I love those ones.
We can ask.
Wow.
See, we can ask midway in a conversation. So what are you hearing so far? What is impacting you? Is this helpful? We can ask at the end of a conversation, tell me 3 things that were helpful today. What are your 3 takeaways? We can say really midway in a conversation, I want to pause here. Tell me if this is working for you. Like, is this helpful so far? We can always ask, and we can ask someone we're sitting with who's brand new. We can ask a current client we've been coaching for 6 months. Hey, I want to pause. Let's talk about the coaching. Is this helpful? Are there things we're not getting to that you want us to get to? Are there things you'd like more of from me?
Mm-hmm.
Asking is one of the most direct ways to find out, are we moving the needle?
Right.
And now if we're sitting with someone new, right, and we're a new coach, that could feel uncomfortable. Like, well, I don't know, Carolyn, what if they go, no, this isn't really helpful? It's like my encouragement would be like, look, we want to know. So I've never had a new coach come to me in my school or elsewhere and say they said no. But what you might get back is there might be more vagueness. Well, because remember, people, especially new people to us, are going to be polite. We cannot discount politeness. Especially, right, Sylvain, one of your questions is like, how is it different from coaching in different parts of the world? We know that culturally, right, different cultures and different people are more reserved. They might not be as willing to say, well, this felt a little mediocre or lukewarm.
They are not all from New York City. That's what you are saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want, when I'm coaching Europeans, right, or different parts of the world, I'm going to be more sensitive to that. I'm going to look for different things. I might play with questions. I might say, so listen, if we were not being polite, maybe on a scale of 1 to 5, how useful was that question? 5 being really useful and 1 being not useful at all. Maybe if someone's being polite, they'll say, oh, it was a 3. And I'll know maybe it was a 1, right? It's like, especially with new people, I want to find ways that are culturally appropriate to get a sense of if this is useful or not, right?
That's great.
And we want to bypass politeness.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to be polite, but we want to know that's in the room. We have to know as new coaches, politeness is in the room, and that's natural, and we're attempting to get underneath that.
I love that, Caroline. And we did that exercise in the school where you ask us to send email to client, which I found very scary at the start, asking those 3 questions. So what do I do which is effective for you? What would you like me to do more of or less of? And the third one, which was, did anything I do did not work for you, but you didn't dare telling me? And I was very scared when I see the answer coming, and I had to open the email and read it. But it was really helpful to help me fine tune a few things, know what I was doing well, I could do more of, what I had to improve on. So I agree. Asking is a great way to get that feedback.
Yeah, and it takes the mystery out of it, right? It doesn't need to be mysterious. We don't have to wonder if like we're making a difference. We can start to ask, and we can know that like if we're new, there's going to be a learning curve, right? It's like I'm not, when I first started, the level of, let's say, ability to help someone experience transformation was different than where it is now. And that's, of course, because, the path to mastery is time. That's like, I need to put time in to get to mastery, right? And what I love about the profession of coaching is the path is endless. It's like, I have lots more to learn. I've been in this profession over 15 years, and I know I can still become a better coach. And I love that. I love that about this profession.
And I think it's connected, Caroline, to what you said about having a coach for the coach, so to say. And it reminds me of the work around deliberate practice, which is you don't get better just by practicing. If you just practice, you are just going to get consistency. You don't get excellence. But if you keep practicing and you keep getting feedback and you integrate that feedback in your practice to get better, then over time, you get to mastery. And so I think that's where the coach of the coach can really help, because you can reflect on what happened, you can ask questions, you can share when you are stuck somewhere with a client, and that's super helpful. Otherwise, you are alone with your client and you don't know if what you are doing is the best you could have done, or if there are other ways to do it. Yeah.
That's right. And the other thing is, coaches are amazing people. I love working with coaches. And if we're not being coached deeply in our own lives, we can't really coach others deeply in their own lives. It's like we want people to share their lives with us. And if we're not willing to do that work ourselves, we're just not going to be able to get traction. And another thing I want to share, Sylvain, and this, is like, so there's lots of coaches who do more of what we would call goal line coaching. And often at the beginning, that's kind of what we've been trained in, like meaning externally, like things in our life, like jobs, how much money we're making, where we live, like the outer stuff is good. We all have stuff, right? Like I wanted a nice house, and my coach helped me create the money to do that, right? That was fun. But how I'm being, what's happening inside of me, that's more what we would call soul line coaching, right? Or some people call it chess board coaching versus chess player, which I also love. It's like chess board coaching can only go so far. Chess player coaching, that's why when I work with people, often they're working with me for 3, 4, 5, 6 years because we're going deeper inside of them versus just being on the goal line of their lives.
Wow. Yeah. And some people call that as well the doing or the being dimension. And so when people ask you a lot of questions around how to do something, that's more the doing. But when you look deeper around emotions and fear, etc., then you can go into the being. And here there is a lot of work, I think, that can be done. That's great.
Absolutely.
Caroline, you mentioned earlier when I asked you to introduce yourself that you are a coach and a facilitator. Can you say more around that? So what kind of facilitation you do, and how are the two roles maybe informing or helping each other?
So, first of all, I facilitate a lot at my school, right? So I have this school for coaches. It's a 6-month school where coaches come to learn how to grow their business. But as you know firsthand, Sylvain, obviously it goes way deeper than that, right? Because when we're learning how to grow our business, we're actually learning how to become better coaches, because we have to. Like, we can't grow our business without becoming better at coaches, because they go hand in hand. Learning how to have deep, meaningful conversations is really the first step in creating a client. And when we learn how to have deep, meaningful conversations, we're also learning how to be better coaches. So in my school, I facilitate lots and lots. And to me, facilitating means you're up in front of the room, in front of a group of people. It could be 4 people, it could be 400 people, it could be 4,000 people. But to me, facilitating means I'm up in front of the room. Often with facilitating, there's a teaching component, right? We're teaching things as we facilitate. So I facilitate in my school a lot, and then I also facilitate in the corporate world. And in that world, I'm facilitating groups of leaders, different levels of management, where I'm facilitating events to create stronger leadership inside of leaders in the corporate world. And they're very different. Facilitating at my school and facilitating leaders in corporate organizations is both, there's a lot of differences and there's a lot of similarities. How I'm being, that's where things don't change, right? My job is to show up fully in service to those people, whether they're inside of Velcro or whether it's in my school, right? They're no different. However, the challenges they're facing, well, I would say, look, all of us need to learn how to be leaders in our whole lives. I don't care what our profession is, coaches, CEOs, teachers, whoever we are. However, look, in the corporate world, there's very different things that corporate leaders, as you well know, are facing, right? In terms of the demands on them. So I do, so I would say my facilitation ranges, and I used to facilitate, by the way, I would do events for women. I did a lot of co-facilitating with my dear friend and business partner, Michelle Bauman, who passed away now 6 years ago. And we would facilitate groups of women. We did coaching groups for women. We did coaching groups for professional women. And then after she passed away, I took some time off from that, but then I came back and did more facilitating for women leaders and those kinds of things. And I love all that.
It sounds, Caroline, a little bit like coaching is one-on-one and facilitation is similar, but with more than one. Is that a fair definition?
I think that's a fair definition. I would concur. I mean, I've coached business partners. That's something I do. So I'm coaching two people at once, and that doesn't quite feel like facilitating. But to me, the distinction is coaching, being up in front of a room where it's like I'm leading an event. That to me defines facilitation more clearly, because you could coach two people. But once we're in front of a group of 4 or 6, even if we're leading a group, there's more of a facilitation factor, right? Because we have to be aware of a group. We have to be aware of what's happening in the room, whether it's a virtual room or a live event. So to me, that is the distinction.
And if we build on that, Caroline, there are people who do groups, there are people who do retreats, so they take the group somewhere for a few days. There are people that just do one-on-one. Are there any tips you have for people who are starting around that? Should I just focus on the one-on-one, and when I get to a certain level, I do a group, or no, I do the group because it will help me in my one-on-one? Do you see some good tips for people starting?
I mean, to me, the most important thing for any coach is to be doing what would be fun for them. So there's no shoulds, right? It's like, oh, should I do a group? I mean, that happens all the time, right? Coaches are like, should I do a group? Should I be doing this? Should I lead this? And it's like, well, what would be fun for you? Because whatever would be fun for you, likely you're going to do a better job at. So there are coaches who only facilitate retreats, who only facilitate groups. They do not like one-on-one, and that is just fine. That is 100% fine. And then there are coaches who only want to do one-on-one, and that's beautiful, right? And I want to respect that. There's no like right, wrong. I like variety. So I'm someone who likes my individual practice. I like facilitating groups. I like facilitating larger groups. I like running small groups because I like variety. Right? But that's not for everybody. I mean, I know coaches who never want to do anything except for one-on-one. So the most important thing as a newer coach is to start with what would be fun for you. And if you want to do both, start with wherever you are, right? Like doing both. If you're newer, trying to lead a group and create a one-on-one practice is a recipe, in my opinion, for disaster based on everything I've seen. It's like we have coaches in my school who are like, well, I want to do both. And we'll be like, let's slow down. It's difficult to do that at the same time because the muscle of filling a group and leading a group is different than the muscle of working with one-on-one people and creating a one-on-one client. They're very different. There's overlap. There's things we do the same, but filling a group requires a different kind of muscle than creating a one-on-one client. So if we're new, doing both of those at the same time just won't be as successful.
Right. Caroline, in what you said today, there is a lot of optimism for the profession of coaching. And I love that because on one hand, you say, do what is fun for you. Then you said as well, it's not about me, it's about the client. And you said as well, it's not about finding the next question. It's just about being present. And I think all of that take a little bit of the pressure that new coaches will put on themselves when they come in the profession. And that's really liberating. That enable new coaches to really work on their strengths. So I love that message. I'm going to close with two questions, Caroline. One is, what's the advice you would have for new coaches based on your experience? Is there something you can give them as they start in the profession?
Well, first of all, I appreciate, Sylvain, that you said I sound optimistic, because I am. I think this is the best profession on the planet. So I want to make sure that anybody who's listening knows that welcome to the profession. Thank you for coming. It's really important, right? There's over 8 billion people on the planet. There's plenty of clients for all of us, right? Everybody, this is a profession that is still relatively new. And it's growing. So as a new coach and newer coaches, and really for all coaches, whether you're new or more seasoned, find a place to get coached deeply. Find a place or a coach to get coached deeply. It's one of the most important things we need to keep doing for ourselves, right? That's how this is a newer profession, right? So one of the things that's happening is, from my point of view, the profession needs to be professionalized in greater ways. Mm-hmm. When you hear people joke about, life coaching, right? There's sometimes people who make jokes about it, but there's truth in those jokes, right? Because if we're not strong professionals, that's not great for the profession. So the way we become strong professionals is by finding great places to be coached, learn new things, constantly be coached. Find places that are going to teach you and get you stronger, whether it's on your actual coaching skills or on growing your business. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, I just need to learn how to be a great coach, and leave out learning how to grow your business. They go hand in hand. And it's one of the best parts of the business. Learning how to create a strong business can be one of the most fun things to do if you learn how to do it.
8 billion clients out there. I love that because it's growing every day.
That's right.
But at the same time, I realize how tiny my market share is. So I think I can do more.
Right.
Okay, my last question, Caroline. Where do you see coaching in 5 years? How do you think the practice will evolve?
Well, I think the professionalizing of the profession will deepen, right? As more coaches come on the scene, as more people like you, Sylvain, get out into the world more, it's it's solidifying. And I think that will occur in the next 5 years. I think what also will occur is that, the profession will make a bigger difference. I mean, obviously all over the world, right? We're seeing it in the news, and we're seeing it in our own personal lives from, having all walked through a pandemic, a global pandemic. It's like people are longing for change, and they're longing for more fulfilling lives. They're longing for ways to learn how to connect and be better as people, whether it's as a parent, whether it's as a leader, whether it's as a child to an adult, to an aging parent, right? There's so many areas where the profession of coaching can make a difference in our health and well-being. It's like the options are endless. So I see the profession of coaching making an even bigger difference in the world, in the overall joy, success, and fulfillment that people experience. And to me, the ripple effect of that, right, is that more people are being of service in their lives, no matter what they're doing, right? It's like if we can help people get stronger in their own lives, they will make a bigger difference to those around them. And that's what I see happening in the profession.
Wow, thank you, Caroline. That's really inspiring and energizing. And thank you so much for having taken the time to serve our audience today. Thank you.
It's been great being with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. I am Sylvain Newton. For 20 years, the AC purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organizations, and society worldwide. To find out more about the Association for Coaching and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our website at associationforcoaching.com. You can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insights from our Coaching Perspectives magazine.